All right, folks, it's another edition of the radio show with Marc Lee. And of course, we've got another busy day here in Durham. I've been keeping busy with a lot of different things going on. As a matter of fact, last week was over there at the Carolina Theater where I'm at the board of, and definitely was checking out a lot of things that are going on. As a matter of fact, this month, at the end of the month, we will be having a fundraising event. So that's part of the reason I was over there last week, was over there recording a couple of the artists, Jazz McKelly, John Shearer, as well as John Howie Jr. And some of y'all may remember John Howie Jr. because his music was featured in that movie Jeepers Creepers, which is actually one of those classic movies and all of that. And he lives here in the Triangle area, and I consider him a friend and all of that. So definitely it was good catching up with him and catching up with some of the staff members. And of course, we've got a new executive director, so had a chance to talk to Randy as well as talk to some other folks that were there, including the folks from Triad Studios based in Chapel Hill that are handling the video work for us. And of course, a number of folks, including our mayor, were over there giving their testimony to the reasons that they love the Carolina Theater. So that was a great event last week. Really enjoyed it. And then, of course, there was a lot of other things going on. I understand that the Durham Bulls had a fan fest that I did not get a chance to make it to. So I was checking that out. And of course, I did get a chance to watch the Kentucky Derby. So that was real fun, checking that out and seeing that a small horse actually managed to win that race. So that was real fun. And definitely it looks like this is a horse that if it gets the lead, does not like to give up the lead. So that's the way that sometimes our entrepreneurs are as well. If they get ahead of the game, they try to stay ahead of the game as much as possible. So that was going on, checking that out. And of course, I did check out the president's speech to the Congress last week as well. So I heard that he's definitely looking at some things like police reform, looking at things like maybe taxing the rich a little bit more. I know that they may not be pleased about that at all, but we'll see how that goes. And then, of course, was looking at some infrastructure things and also not letting folks hide their money offshore as easily as they have been doing. And of course, looking at things around immigration reform and a number of things in that category as well. And of course, today was a very sad day. As you know, there have been other police shootings, including one here in North Carolina at Elizabeth City. And the person who was involved in that, in terms of being the victim of that, his funeral was today. So there was a lot going around the Brown case and all of that. So a lot of people were down here for that. I understand that even some civil rights leaders have been in this area and will be attending that service, or are attending that service, as I think is going on even as we're speaking. But folks like Al Sharpton, Mr. Crump, who handled the case there in Minnesota, as well as a number of others have come down. I think even some of the members of the Floyd family are down here as well. So that's just some of the things that I'm aware of that are going on in our community. And as always, we've got some amazing guests. So I'm getting to bring one of my guests on and see what they've got to say about what's going on in their world. So got Asia Marie Woods on with me. So we're going to talk to her and see what she's got happening in her world. So how are you doing, Asia? Glad to see you here and everything. So what's happening in your world and how are you doing? I know a lot of folks are trying to survive the pandemic. A lot of folks have gone out and got their vaccines, even though we still got a lot more that have to get it and everything. But just how are you doing? How's your family doing? How's everybody doing where you are?
We are in Philadelphia and we're doing well. The weather is starting to get warm here, so that's exciting. The COVID cases, per the news, are going down, are trending down. So that's also good news. And looking forward to the summer. I know I have a 12-year-old daughter. She's in school part-time. You know, they go in a couple of days and they go stay home a couple of days. So that hasn't been the best. You know, I'll be excited for next school year when all the kids can go back to school and do what they're supposed to do and leave, you know, us parents in peace. Okay.
Yeah, I remember there was that famous quote that I forget which of the TV producers said, but they were saying that they had a lot more respect for teachers now because they had to do the teaching as well. So it's definitely one of our famous producers, and they were saying that they definitely have mad respect for the teachers that are out there. And I can relate to that. I'm actually one of those folks that don't have any kids, but I do have two nephews, and my in my late 50s, but my brother was a late father as well. So my nephews are actually around that same age as
Okay.
your daughter. So I've got a nephew that was born in 2008. So in August, he will turn 13, and his younger brother was born a year later, so he will turn 12. So right now they are 11 and 12, and they'll be 12 and 13 in the month of August. So they're definitely in that same age range, those preteen heading into the teenage years. I don't know about your daughter, but I know my nephews are very much involved in sports. My brother was glad that they were getting back out into their leagues and things of that nature, and they are also very much into their video games. I know that one of the family outings we were able to have last year, my nephew was showing me the game Roadblocks, which he's very much into, and there were a couple of other games that they were into, and I'm sitting there going like, all right, well, I'll try to hang with y'all as the quote unquote cool uncle or whatever, but I'll see whether I can or not. So that's what I was doing, and trying to hang with them on those video games.
Okay. Yep, I heard of Roblox. She does play that. She's a swimmer, so we haven't gotten in the pool for a year now. So it'll be interesting to see how she, gets her stamina back up once we go back into a pool. But yeah, I'm excited for things to start turning around for everyone finally, and hopefully by the end of this year we'll be somewhere back to a norm. I think it'll be a new norm, but hopefully we'll be back to some kind of normalcy.
Some kind of normalcy of some sort or another. I'm definitely what I'm hoping for. I know that on your profile, one of the things you talk about is that you work with entrepreneurs and you encourage your clients to quote unquote go big, never play small, and make sure something that I'm oftentimes fascinated by, and I'll get into this a little bit with you, to make sure all their legal ducks are in a row and all of that. So I'd love to hear some of the clients that you're working with and some of the ways that you encourage them to do that. And what I was going to say about the legal ducks in a row, and I'll just go ahead and bring it up, is I work with a lot of entertainers. I work with a lot of people in the arts, and definitely even some small business owners as well, even some restaurant owners. And I'm oftentimes fascinated by the fact that they don't have the basics. They don't oftentimes won't have a contract, won't have a business plan, won't have a number of other things that should be the very basics that you need just to run a business or just to have anything of those sorts. I know that I was one time talking to Ron Thomas, I believe is his name, and he's a friend of a friend's, and he does some business consulting out of Dubai. And he was talking about how sometimes folks will come to him wanting them to pitch a plan or, sponsor or give him some funds or him give them some funds and all of that. And one of the first questions he asked them, even if they're relatives or friends of his, is that they have a business plan. And quite often the answer is no. So like I said, I'm sure that that's some of the things that you're fascinated by as well. So I was just wondering if you could share some of these business pratfalls, for lack of a better term, that you wish students, wish folks would be more involved in that they aren't involved in. Because I agree that a lot of times we don't do the basics that we should.
Right. And you know what? Before I was an attorney, I was one of those people. I started my first business right after college. I started a makeup business. I would do makeup. I had makeup artists that worked for me, and I just wanted to make money. Right. And I didn't have a business plan. Unfortunately, it cost me a lot. I had to close down that business, and I'll explain why shortly. It cost me a lot of money at the end for not having all my legal ducks in a row. So I kind of, preach this sermon because of what happened to me before I went to law school and now doing what I do. So I started my makeup business in 2000. When did I start that? 2009. In 2011, I got an offer to franchise the business. So basically the makeup squad, what it was called, was going to be in every major city. So every city was going to have a makeup squad that would provide makeup services in that area. And we were going to have an app and all of that. And this was back, 10 years. Wow, it's 10 years ago. So I didn't have a trademark for the name. And so that means I didn't own that name nationally, right? So I own my business in my state, but I wasn't able to register the trademark because there was another company with the same exact name in Texas. So, and they were using that name before me, about a year before I was. So trademark law says whoever's the first to use it, even if they don't register that trademark, they have the right to it. And when you're trying to franchise a business, your intellectual property is what's going to basically, you're basically transferring the rights to that intellectual property to your franchisees. So that franchise deal fell apart for me. in 2011. And then I went ahead and went to law school in 2012. And went to law school, did very well, went to the University of Pittsburgh. I'm from Philly. So I went to Pittsburgh for law school for 3 years. And then I came back to the Philadelphia area when I was done. And then I decided to work for myself and help entrepreneurs. Like I said, get all your legal ducks in a row, because a lot of times we get caught up in the now, like, oh, it's just a little small business. And that's how I was thinking. I never saw a franchise deal coming my way 2 years into business. It was just me. I had a small daughter and I just love to do makeup. And I really wasn't thinking about the big picture. And there really is a big picture. And I'm hoping that most people are in business for the big game, right? The end game and like your exit strategy. You want to make enough money so you can exit. The business can thrive without you being there and being tied down to that. And so I really try to take my entrepreneur's mindset from, I know you think it's small right now, but what do you really want at the end? Let's focus on that and then reverse engineer on how we're going to get there.
Now, that makes a lot of sense. You bring up a couple of things that I'm fascinated by and all of that. One of those is I do feel that a lot of times we don't think about generational wealth and all of that. I know that even in my own family, we have land in Halifax, North Carolina, and definitely on that land is timber and, of course, even some crops and some other things. So we do have land that is been handed down generation to generation, and hopefully it will continue. Because, as a matter of fact, I know cousins that have had relatives that have passed, like their parents and everything, and that property is now, under their guidance and everything. So it does look like it's going generation to generation. But we oftentimes don't talk about generational wealth, and we also oftentimes don't always come from entrepreneurial background. So that's one of the first questions I was going to ask you. Were your parents entrepreneurs, or were you like the kid that when you were a youngster, they just knew you were going to be selling lemonade and on the stand and doing Girl Scout cookies and the rest of the early entrepreneurial things that folks get involved in when they are youngsters? Or is this something that totally came out of the blue because your parents were like working class folks that didn't have a thought of entrepreneurship?
Mm-hmm. So my parents are very, very traditional. They worked in corporate America for like 30 years and they retired, the very traditional track, and did very well. And, they were very academic focused in our household, which is why, I went on to get my law degree. But no, they were not. I was the first one. And, my dad will admit this. He was not that supportive of me being this entrepreneur. He just felt like it was too risky. I'm a single mother, had a daughter. So he just was like, why just go get a job? Like, get your benefits, work there for 30 years and retire. He really wanted me to kind of follow that traditional path. And, I just kind of rebelled against it. And now he's totally on board. He's like my biggest supporter. So, but yeah, he definitely wasn't, feeling it in the beginning. I will say that he'll come on and say it too.
Understood. But it's interesting. A lot of times, it seems like in this modern day era, as more and more people are pivoting, partially because of COVID, but I think it was happening even before COVID hit the stands and everything. We're seeing more and more people that are going that entrepreneurship route. They may call it the gig economy, they may call it whatever, but it does seem more and more people are going that route. And I know that even here on this particular network and everything, the international broadcast media, and we're in the process of changing that to pod TV and everything. But even here on this network, there has been conversations with our founders about how they feel that we're using 18th century values to teach in the 21st century, that we're not teaching enough about financial wellness. We're not teaching enough about entrepreneurship. We're not teaching enough about things like that. And I do agree with them, because I do feel that a lot of times we train people to go work in the corporate world. And in some ways, that's almost like going back to plantation work. And it doesn't matter whether you're white, black, brown, or whatever. It still has that plantation kind of feel to it and everything. So do you think that entrepreneurship is seeing a rebirth in your mind?
I do think we're seeing a rebirth, and I think actually access has been opened up to the people who typically didn't have access to entrepreneurship, and the cost of entry has gone down in some fields. And with the internet from the 90s and now the social media boom, there's so much access and availability that you have that you're able to reach people. I think that's the biggest game changer, because let's say 30 years ago, entrepreneurship was all about brick and mortar. You would start a business in your local area, and that would be your business. It would be very hard to reach someone, if you're in Philly, to get a customer from California. Well, now the game has changed. I can be in Philadelphia and get a client in California. Now I have so much access to more potential customers, clients, and so does everyone else. And so now that cost of entry is going down. Your overhead is lower because you don't have to have a brick and mortar to have a business anymore. So I really think, there is definitely a rebirth, and I think it's even like younger people are getting into it. And I wish, I did start my business right after college, but I wish even in college, I wish I would have started just a little bit earlier, just knowing what I know now. And they don't teach you these things in school, in the traditional education system. So I do think the educational system needs a little bit of rebirth, right? Like you said, it's like antiquated theories and academic processes that are just old, and they're just not current with the times. And education is very important, but that needs a rebirth as well, just to kind of make this all come together.
Yep, I definitely agree with you. And I know one of the other things that Potted, which is one of the sources I've used to get a number of my guests and everything, talks about in your bio and everything, is the fact that you're an advocate, and apparently are one yourself as well, for that whole concept of being a single mother. So I was wondering, what are some of the things that as a single mom, you try to advocate specifically for women? Because I do have some friends of mine that are single mothers that are in the various ages. As a matter of fact, one of my friends, Jess Everhart, is a member of our leadership community here in Durham, North Carolina, and she's actually just sending her teenage son off to college. I believe he's going to college this coming fall and everything. So, like I said, and I've got other friends that have got either kids or grandkids that are now off to college, or some that are younger, so they've got kids like you that are in grade school and all of that. But what are some of the things that you feel that you need to advocate for those single moms when you're advocating for them?
Absolutely. So sometimes single motherhood can come with a stigma, and but there's so many different ways that someone can become a single mother. There's divorce, or becoming a widower. So there's so many different variations of a single mother, and my goal is to really just steer away from the negative stigma that us single mothers may put on ourselves, or the society may attach to it, and just say it is truly an asset to be a single mom. There's this saying, and I won't take credit for it, that if you want something done, give it to a single mother, because we get it done because we have to, right? We have no choice but to get it done. If we're sick, we still got to feed our kids. If we're tired, we still got to go to work. We don't have a fallback plan. So we are really, really time focused. We have we're very disciplined with our time. We're able to get things done. And I think it's such a bonus to have any single mother on any type of team, because we just come with a very wide perspective of experience and focus, and we're just able to accomplish things in a very short amount of time, because in real life, that's what happens to us.
No, I definitely agree with you. And another thing that I know sometimes I'm amazed by my single mother or friends and everything is the fact that even though it can actually be an asset, meaning that y'all have already got a lot of knowledge, a lot of not both knowledge in terms of life, knowledge in terms of just wisdom and all of that. A lot of times guys, for whatever reasons, are intimidated by folks that are successful and also single. I've had that conversation with a number of my friends that are, that while they are single, they are also in that dating process and everything. And they are sometimes fascinated by the fact that guys will definitely seem like they're interested, but then will also give signs that they are intimidated by them as well. So is that something that you run across? And is that, how do you encourage your friends if they want to go into that? And like I said, some people are perfectly content with just being single and not even wanting the spouse level or whatever, or the significant other level. But if they decide to go into that, but they find folks intimidated, what is some of the advice that you give people? Because I have heard folks that are literally said that they get frustrated because they find folks that are intimidated by the fact that they are smart and intelligent women. So part of it is the fact that not only they're single, but they're also very smart and intelligent.
Right. So I have experienced this exact scenario in my personal life. And I think what it comes down to when we're single mothers, like we said, we have no fallback plan. It's always on us, and we just have to be prepared for any and everything. And what I think the true issue behind all of this is that we're scared to depend on someone. So it's not, I think they're threatened by the fact that we don't quote unquote need them, but we want them, right? And so I think it's just a matter of communicating that to whoever you're, talking to, is that it's not that I don't need, I've been forced not to depend on anyone, right? Because of this life that I have to live as a single mother. And so when you meet someone and, they want to feel needed and wanted, it's a very hard adjustment. It was hard for me in my relationship to just kind of just relax, like we're so intense. We're so like ahead. We're always like the next day ahead. We're always planning ahead, like what's going on. So I think that's the issue. So I think it's, dating or just any type of situation where someone feels threatened because we're smart and we're just we have no choice but to be. It's really because of that. Just let us know, like, hey, relax, okay? You're going to be okay. It's okay to relax for one day and then go back to that the next. So I just think it takes time. It's not something that can happen overnight. But with the right person, it'll all work out.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and everything. Staying on that, and then also I wanted to get to the employment situations that as well. So it's actually a two-part question. So I'll start with staying with that part of it and everything. I do know that sometimes on the single women track and everything, and like I said, I'm in my late 50s and single as well, and I've dated some folks that were single women, and I do know that sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes they want you to engage the family, in my mind, too early. One of my favorite saying is that I have, and I've used it a couple of times, is I'm still trying to decide if I like you, much less if I like the rest of the family as well. So like I said, I do think that sometimes folks rush into the wanting to create the instant family kind of situation. And sometimes that can be a very hard situation because in some cases it's not just an instant parental thing, but in some cases it can even be an instant grandparent kind of thing, depending on how old you are and everything in the nature of the relationship. So when you're talking to your single women, what kind of advice do you give them in that regard? Do you tell them that they should try to engage the kids early, or are you like me and you're like, make sure that you get to know these folks first and make sure that you're even comfortable with them on both sides, both the side of the person that you're talking to, be it man or woman, or the person that is in the single category?
Yeah, I always tell them to look at it from the kids' perspective. So because we're adults, we know that 90% of our relationships are not going to last forever, right? So with those, and I used to be I was a finance major in college, so math is my thing. So with that type of probability, I would not, introduce the children until you feel like they may be in that 10% category. And there's no way to really tell, right? So we're not going to get it perfect every time. But just know the reality that it's going to likely not work out. And it doesn't mean you don't have to, introduce your kids to them, but maybe introduce them to them as a friend, and sporadically, not every time you're with them. I think it's just really case by case. I would hate to give like a blanket opinion or advice on that. I think it's going to be case by case. I think if we know going into things that most of the people we meet, we're not going to be with long term, and we don't want, our children having people coming in and out, because then that creates like abandonment issues. If they get attached to someone, now they're going, now it's a new person, now they're attached to this person, now they're going. So I think you just kind of have to play it by ear. We're not perfect, and, just do the best that you can. But I do agree, like, I don't know about meeting the whole family early on. I think that's, a bit much, because at the end of the day, you have to like the person, right? The families don't matter because they're not going to be there during the bad times or even all the good times. So it's really about the two people, the two adults that are, trying to get to know each other, and then, bring the kids in slowly, very, very slowly.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And that comes back to what I was going to ask about employment, because I do know that before the pandemic, and definitely more and more people are working from home now, but before the pandemic, there was a lot of companies, including some down here, what we call the Research Triangle area, that were very much good about providing care for their employees that had kids and things of that nature. So whether that was a daycare on site, whether that was certain kinds of leaves that were given to parents and things of that nature. But there were a variety of ways that they worked into that field and everything and tried to make sure that the kids were part of the employment situation for some kind of ways. And it didn't discourage people from the workforce. Is that something that you still feel is prevalent? And is it something that should be prevalent?
I feel like childcare is always it's a big issue, not just for single mothers, it's for parents in general. It's expensive. Right. That kind of what led me to be my own practitioner, is that I wanted the flexibility and I hated the guilt that came with, having to take off of work because I need to go to be there for my child, and the employer not really understanding that. Or they understand because they have children too, but they don't want to hear it because dollars are dollars, right? And businesses are in business to make money and, all of that stuff. And I totally get it from, owning a business myself. But, we got to get back to just being human. And at the end of the day, that's what we all are. And these companies will continue to thrive whether you're there or not. So, I try not to comment on corporate America and employment because I have a very different perspective. I didn't fall for I had to go get a job after college. I did get a job after college. But then, in 2010, I went full time as an entrepreneur. So I've pretty much been an entrepreneur since 2010, minus, my law school years. And it's been the best experience. Yeah, it's hard. Like, I do not glorify entrepreneurship. I'm sorry to kind of go off track with your question, but I just want to mention this. Like, entrepreneurship is wonderful. It's needed, but we also need people to work for us, right? So I think, I don't want people to get caught up in like entrepreneurship is like the only way or to make money or the new way. Like my parents were in corporate America for 30 years, did very well. They live an amazing life now. They're retired. So it's not the only way. And you truly just have to want to do it. It's very, very hard, but very rewarding. So I just, when I do talk to people who are trying to get into it, I don't sell them the bells and whistles. I really say, listen, what you're going to do when 1 month, you don't make any money in your business. Are you going to give up? Are you going to try to pivot and figure out why? And the pandemic really taught us a lesson, Some of my clients didn't make money for months and didn't know what to do or should they shut down. And some tough decisions had to be made. And so I think, that goes back to kind of being prepared very early on in your business before catastrophes happen like this, to kind of have a plan in place. So sorry to go off track, but I just wanted to say.
No, you're doing good. And you're actually bringing up some good points that are actually giving me some thoughts about even some of the questions and everything. One of the things that I definitely agree with you with entrepreneurship and all of that, but one of the things that I sometimes think folks are not prepared is not having a certain amount of money in the bank and things of that nature. And I do know that a lot of times folks will be like, do I need to have, if I'm coming out of corporate America, do I need to have, say, 2 checks worth of money, or maybe even 6 months worth of money in the bank before I launch into this entrepreneurship venture and all of that? So what are your thoughts when you're talking to your clients? And do you think that they need to have, even before the pandemic, like to have maybe 6 months worth of money? Because I do know some folks that literally, they wanted to start their entrepreneurship idea while working a 9 to 5 or while working a series of part-times. And in some cases, they've done quite well while doing that. And then they may decide, look, I'm ready to go full tilt for what I want to do in terms of the entrepreneurship. But say I've only got enough, and they say that we're all probably about 1 or 2 paychecks away from poverty anyway, the vast majority of society. So what is your advice in terms of how much capital should they have, for lack of a better term, before in your mind folks should start an entrepreneurship business?
I am totally an advocate for having a 9 to 5 and working on your entrepreneurship, your small business part-time starting out. That's how I started my makeup business, and it worked out for me. I'm a little conservative when it comes to savings because I'm a single mother. So I don't have like a spouse that could kind of carry me if things get a little rough. So I had to have like about a year of savings before I felt comfortable doing the things that I wanted to do, just because, I wanted to make sure, my daughter would be covered. Like I could miss a couple meals a day. My daughter, however, she's not missing any meals. Mom, I want breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So, she doesn't want to struggle with me as an entrepreneur. So I had to just make sure that, I had a year in savings. And, they say 6 months, but I think, sometimes the first 2 to 3 years in business, you don't really make a profit, right? You kind of make enough to sustain. You're spending a lot of money just getting things up and running. And I think if you do your business plan, like you mentioned earlier in the show, you can kind of project. Now, everything doesn't go as planned, but you definitely can, at a minimum, project what you're going to be making, how much you're going to need to be, how much you need to be covered. And then, with all of this entrepreneurship incubators that they have and grants programs, a lot of corporations, they have a lot of money that they want to give away because it's a tax write-off. So I really, really encourage entrepreneurs to go after those programs. They don't get enough applicants. So there's a lot of, even if your local government, your business chambers where you are located, they have programs, grants, there's money available to you if you really just take some time to go get it. And, using other people's money, using a loan or a bank isn't a bad idea at all. If if you're smart and you are serious and you're going to use the money the right way.
No, I definitely agree with you on that. I'm actually a big fan of and Riot, which is one of the groups here in North Carolina, does it. There are other groups that do them as well, but I'm actually a big fan of pitch contests because I think a lot of times folks can actually pitch their ideas and get an idea of even whether the business is viable, or because the judges and other folks will let you know, and sometimes they'll let you know in no uncertain terms whether it's viable or not. So I am definitely a big fan of those pitch contests, and that's just one of the kind of funds that you're talking about that are out there and that are available. What are some of the other ways that you would encourage folks to do? Because I do think that sometimes we get too caught up in what I call, and I know what you said about your dad and everything, but we do get caught up in the friend and family plan, meaning that that's where we're trying to get our funds from. And a lot of times they've got their own concerns, they've got their own issues, they've got their own things, and we can't always depend on them. It might have worked for Robert Townsend in his movie, but it doesn't work for everybody.
Right. So I think delayed gratification is kind of the name of the game in the beginning. So it's, you have to cut back. So for me, out of law school, I didn't go get the high-rise apartment for me and my daughter. We scaled down so that I could build, my dream over here. And now we're okay. We're fine. So, it's a lot of sacrifice, a lot of delayed gratification, and it's worth the reward. So I think if you go in knowing that there's light at the end of the tunnel, but just kind of dive in and do the work and know your numbers. At the end of the day, business is all numbers. And I think that's where a lot of people get into trouble. They don't know their numbers and they're not tracking what's coming in and what's going out. They're kind of living day by day. Things are afloat, things are okay. And then something happens and they realize they have no cash flow, no emergency fund, because they really just were kind of going day by day. And I'll admit, when I had my makeup business, that's 100% how I was doing it. Money with everybody wants their makeup done on Saturday. So Saturday, right. Friday, cash is coming in, we're busy. Wedding season is busy. Money's going out and, you don't really realize, okay, I don't have enough money to, maybe open a new location that I wanted to open, or, really invest the money. Like once you make the money, now you have to make more money instead of, having to put your time in to make that money. So I really think exchanging time for money initially is okay, but eventually you want to get to a point where the money you're making is now being invested in making money somewhere else where you don't have to physically show up and be there. There's a lot of wear and tear on our bodies working, all day, every day. You say you work like 6-7 days a week. That's a lot of wear and tear. So it'd be nice to have, the money we earn now. Okay, what are we going to do with this earned money? We're going to put it in investments, whether it's real estate, the stock market, let it, grow for us and kind of shift our mindset from just having to be like the worker in the business and becoming the more visionary operational person to help that business grow and thrive. And maybe one day you'll sell it or just retire.
Yeah, because I sometimes think that we sacrifice too much as entrepreneurs, just our basic day-to-day necessities. So I'm very much about wellness and in terms of like health, in
Mm-hmm.
terms of diet, in terms of a number of other things as well. But sometimes we get so caught up in the entrepreneurship spirit that we let things go and all of that. As a matter of fact, I know that I'm about a week and a half, 2 weeks behind a
Mm-hmm.
hair appointment on Wednesday, because I've definitely let the beard go into like that whole Santa Claus kind of space and everything that I don't necessarily enjoy and all of that. But I do think that we sometimes get away from the things that we need to be concerned about because we're so focused on what's going
Mm-hmm.
on the entrepreneurship spirit and all of that.
Right.
So what are some of the other things that you give in terms of advice to the entrepreneurs that you talk to? Because I'm sure that there are a lot of them that are asking you for various advices and things of that nature. So what are some of the things that you encourage them to do? Do you encourage them to take some time out for their, not just for their family time if they are single moms, but if they are
Mm-hmm.
just entrepreneurs that are like maybe young men and young women that don't even have kids yet, coming out of college and everything, but they want to spend time, maybe going jogging, going to the gym, or just, we can't really go to plays and concerts the way that we used to, but that's coming back
Right.
now, going to things like that or going to the park. But what are some of the things that you try to encourage your entrepreneurs to do in that space of wellness?
Wellness. So absolutely. If you have children, I would recommend just getting your children involved with you when you're exercising or taking a break. Sleep is so important. I know if you're like a 9-to-5er and you're an entrepreneur, you might be sleep deprived, but to kind of be at your best performance, you need some sleep. So I would really just dedicate, at least 6 to 7 hours a night of sleep, being active with your children. Definitely make the time out. I didn't realize that I needed rest days or vacation or just a break from the feast and famine of entrepreneurship until I went to law school. So after law school, you have to study for the bar exam. It's 12 weeks of studying for the bar exam. And when you study, it's 7 days a week. And they tell you only study for 8 hours a day. At the end of those 8 hours, do not open the book. Don't go home and go look at it and fall asleep with the book in your hand. They really say your brain can only really maximize 8 hours a day. And after that, it's not really functioning at its highest self. So, and when you're studying for the bar exam, you want to give it your all. You're willing to do all-nighters. You think you're going to do 12 hours a day, and that's really not the best way to do it. So I stuck with that plan. I did 8 hours a day of studying, and then the rest of the day I would go to the gym. I would take a walk. I would just do some mindless activity to just kind of recharge. And that's when I realized that it's not about working 12, 16 hours a day. Yes, there's going to be some very long days in there. But, when you get to a point in your entrepreneurship journey, you're going to realize that those off days or those, sticking to like an 8-hour day is going to be so beneficial. You'll maximize your time. You'll get more done in those 8 hours than you were getting done in the 12 because you're just kind of just focused and your brain is sharp. And it's just so important to just, be careful with your time. You don't have a lot of time here on earth. So if you can, really balance it out. You don't want to just spend 10 years and you look back and all you did was work, work, work. You really got to take some time for yourself to enjoy it.
No doubt about that. You definitely have to do that and everything. If somebody was to ask you right now where you are hoping your business and your law practice would be 5 to 10 years from now, where would you say that would be, even in terms of your entrepreneurship and your encouraging other entrepreneurs? Where do you hope to be in terms of the clients? Like I said, the network is a global network, so we have some shows in Australia and people that are from that area as well. And then we definitely have folks in South Africa and around various parts of the globe. But I was just wondering, what are some of your own personal goals for, say, 5 to 10 years from now? So we're in 2021, so say 2026, 2031.
So here's I don't know if I've ever said this publicly, but I'm a service provider. So that means if I get sick, I can't make money, right? So I can get another lawyer to cover for me, but technically my cases are my cases. This law firm only moves if I move it. And so that's a very big risk to have. Now I have insurance that can cover if things happen, so that's fine. But that's just a very risky business when the business solely relies on me. So I'm actually trying to shift gears where, I'll have the law practice, but I want to get into businesses that don't require my physical contribution for it to be successful. And but we need lawyers, we need doctors, and so I'm going to stay in it. But I really want to shift into legal education, legal seminars. Like I really want something where it doesn't require me to have one-on-one clients all the time, because it's just such a huge risk for me. And the money is in like perpetuity and being able to duplicate yourself and not be there. And you just can't duplicate yourself as a lawyer. You can't duplicate yourself as a doctor. So it's so funny because a lot of my clients, I teach my clients, like, the end game is to like get out, it's not to stay in it forever. And so I'm like, how do I get out of my law firm? Okay. I'm preaching this to everybody, but you really can't. You can't get out of your doctor's office, right? You're the doctor. I'm the lawyer. And so I think what I want to do is scale down the law firm to just have a couple larger clients that I have. And then outside of the law firm, really build a sustainable business that doesn't require my one-on-one touch.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I actually had the pleasure, a friend of mine does a Facebook Live called Purpose and Power, Stephen Walker, but he had a guy on that runs a network called ATS. I think his full name is Antonio Smith, but Antonio Smith was actually and I'm trying to get him on one of the shows here on this network, but he is actually, I think Forbes is about to name him as a billionaire. I know they already have named him as a millionaire, but when he was a youngster, I think between the ages of like 6 and 11 or something like that, he was actually basically abandoned and homeless and living in a dumpster. So to go from dumpster to billionaire is a truly amazing story and all of that. So I know that he's actually got a goal now, which is actually a very noble goal of, I think he wants to give away like 80 to 90% of all this money he's made and everything. So he's actually trying to create new millionaires and is actually having people give him pitches and different other things, because even though he's made this money, it sounds like he's got this noble cause of wanting to also give the money away. But I don't know if anybody that's even attempted to do that except for maybe one of the early Rockefellers, because I do remember hearing stories about the early Rockefeller that would go around and give and even he wasn't giving away like lots of money, but he was giving away, I think, like, maybe 100 here or 1,000 there and something like that. And I remember hearing those kind of folk tales and all of that. So definitely he might be somebody that would be worth connecting with and all of that. That was my reason of bringing him up and everything. Okay. So definitely I have to try to find a way to connect y'all and together. And like I said, I know that they do the whole ATS thing. I think it's a call that's I want to say it's every day, Monday through Friday, and it's like 9 a.m. or something like that. So I'll get in touch with Stephen and see what the link is to that and how they're doing that. But I agree that that's just something that we need to have more of. We were talking about the education system earlier, and definitely I think entrepreneurship needs to be taught better. And I was just wondering, do you feel as a lawyer and a former law student that we're doing well in that category also? Because I'm oftentimes amazed by and I do have friends that are lawyers, some of the things that they don't necessarily know, including some of the basics and all of that. So I know that it varies from state to state, country to country, but do you think as an overall population that we could do better in terms of the knowledge of the law?
Absolutely. The problem, well, not the problem, but the legal system is very reactionary. It's very little. I would say it's 90% reactionary, 10% they're going to be proactive about some law, right? So something's going to happen and now they're going to put some law into place to stop it from happening. And it takes so much time to write a law, pass the law, implement the law, enforce it, so it's just a very antiquated system. And then, as citizens, if you break a law, if you don't even know it's a law that you're breaking, you're still responsible, right? So it's like they don't teach you in school what the rules are, what the crimes are. And for the general part, you kind of know, right? But there's some crimes out there that you may not know that you could be committing, and you're guilty because not knowing is not a defense. So, I don't think it's a way for everyone to know every single law out there. Even I don't. Even after the bar exam, there's still so much that you just won't know. But I think it's an old system. I wish I had a solution. Even law school is very antiquated. It's very everything is based on precedent. It's like, well, what happened 10 years ago? Let's go back to that case. Okay, we're just going to follow what that case said 10 years ago and move on. It's never really like, they don't like to introduce new things. Judges don't like to step on another judge's decision. Then you have like judges being appointed. So now they want to make sure they're following that agenda. In Philadelphia, judges are elected. So they want to, appeal to who, the voters are. And they're trying to make sure they're doing what the voters want. So I just think, the systems are all over the place. There's no unison, no uniform system. The states do what they want to do. The federal government has to be separate from the state most of the time. So it's just, there's no real nexus to any of it. And, you can smoke marijuana in one state. You can't smoke it in another state. You can't smoke it federally at all. So, it's a mess.
It sounds like a mess. It sounds like a mess, and there's so many issues that are coming up now that are going to be needing the lawyers around the country to deal with and to try to figure out an answer, because it's going to be the politicians and the lawyers that are going to have to come up with answers to things like immigration reform, gun control, and the police reform. And I know that those are like three of the big issues that everybody's got on their mind. And of course, those all have legal ramifications. And then you've got things that were on the books that are, coming up around for renewal of their laws, be that things that are coming up around Roe versus Wade, or things that are even coming up around civil rights. So it definitely sounds like a lot of these are things that need the lawyers, but we as a country are still trying to figure out where we're going on all of those 5 issues that I named and everything. And it just seems like the lawyers are even not adding to, but are just as confused as the rest of us.
We're frustrated. Absolutely. We're frustrated because, you can go into court one day and a judge will rule this. And then a year later, you have a very similar case and a different judge will rule something totally in the opposite direction. And when that happens, it's very hard to advise clients on what to do because we have no idea what the judge is going to say this time. I could say, the judge last year said this, but think we were okay. And then we get in there and this judge is on something totally different. So, I have people that call me all the time, if they're not my client, like family and friends in a different state. And they're like, what should I get a new lawyer? A lot of times they want to blame their lawyer, and I won't, lawyers get a bad rap, and some of them are rightfully so. But I always say it's really not the lawyer; it's going to be the judge. Whatever judge you are in front of, if you're in a criminal case, a civil case, know that judge. Look at what that judge has done in the past. What the other judges have done, maybe, but it's really about what is this judge's pet peeves? Are they picky? Are they lenient? Are they more against gun crimes versus family disputes? You really just kind of have to dive into the judge. Unfortunately, it's subjective. And I feel like we need an objective system so that the human opinion is kind of taken out of it. Even juries, juries are not perfect. And I don't really know how we address all these issues, but those are issues. Judges are human, juries are human. And, we're relying on a human-based system to be perfect, and it's just not.
No, I agree with you. It's not perfect. There's got to be some kind of way that it can be. And I'm not one for tossing the baby out with the bathwater, to use that expression. But there's got to be some ways that we can adapt the system. Not saying we have to go whole hog socialism or whole hog some other kind of system, but definitely there's got to be some improvements even in our healthcare and in a number of other things as well. I know a lot of times in our society, we oftentimes hear the conversation about the talk that is had with our males. I know that definitely my brother has had it to some degree. I've definitely got friends with older kids that have definitely had it, but I've never been 100% sure. So I guess I'll ask you now, do you feel that that's a talk that you had to have with your daughter? Because a lot of times we don't hear about the talk with the women as much as we do with the men, but we do know women can also run into issues with law enforcement as well. So as a single mother, is that something that you feel that you have to have with your daughter, to have a conversation with her about what to do should she be pulled over by a police officer and all of that. It is a very popular conversation
You know
throughout
what?
the country.
You're right. And, I didn't have that specific conversation that I probably would have had if I would have had a 12-year-old boy. We watched some of the she watched some of the George Floyd, the Derek Chauvin trial when it was on. So she's aware of what happened and what went wrong and why it's wrong. But we do kind of treat the girls and the boys differently. Now, I will say I am not the most friendly person that cops will pull over. And my daughter's usually in the car with me if I get pulled over. I think I got pulled over for like a broken tail light or something. And I was just so annoyed. I'm like, really? I'm just like, we're human, obviously I can't see my broken tail light because it's the tail, you know what I mean? And the cop just wanted to be so hardball about this tail light. And I gave him a hard time about it. And, it didn't work. I got my ticket, so it didn't work well for me. But my daughter was like really upset. She's like, why do you have to be so mean to the cop? And I'm like, because laws are, they have discretion. They don't have to ticket you every single time. They're not required to. They can use their police discretion on, what they're going to enforce and what they're not. And I feel like a tail light that I didn't even know was aware was out. And I just got my car serviced literally a week ago. I showed him the receipt. I'm like, it wasn't out when they fixed my brakes a week ago. So it must have just went out. And he still wasn't convinced. He just wanted to just give me a tail light ticket. Okay. So, I think it's all about, it's unfortunate that I know if I was a Black male in that incident, it may not have gone the way it went, that I was a woman, going against this police officer that just had to give me a ticket for a taillight. So yeah, I think there's some sexism there in the law enforcement arena. Absolutely. That I haven't really addressed or thought to address, but it's there. But I think it's always been there. I think women always get treated differently than men, whether it's the police or something. Even in the court system, people complain that mothers get all these rights in the family law system and the dads get none of it. So, it's everywhere, unfortunately.
Yes, because I know even and unfortunately she lost her husband recently, but one of our founders, Kim Calhoun, for this network and everything. I know that one of the things that she oftentimes talks about is the way that law enforcement treats women, particularly women that are going through abusive situations and things of that nature. So that's one of her issues that she talks about, is the way that it's oftentimes not done in an effective way. She actually is a big fan of a small town in North Carolina called High Point, because she feels that they have actually done it right, that they separate the folks and that they actually have done it in a lot of other ways correctly. But so she is a big proponent of that particular town, and actually encourages people that if they have any issues in North Carolina, to try to find a way to get to that town. And I don't know whether that's either legal or even possible, but that's one of the things that she encourages and everything. But do you feel that in your mind that the police do not treat women fairly enough? Because I know that that's a big issue that she talks about, and more of that's around domestic violence and domestic abuse, because I don't think she was ever involved in that herself, but I do know she had a sister that has been involved in that in the past. So I was just wondering, and the sister is still living and everything, but I was wondering, is that an issue that you feel we need to work on improving as well?
We do, because there's a stigma around women and sexuality, and, whether a woman says yes or no, can she say yes and then change her mind? A lot of law enforcement are men. And so if these are men using their discretion, right? Because remember I said they have discretion. So they're using their discretion not to kind of take some of these claims seriously. It's a flaw. And so, I do think they need to put additional checks and balances in the system when there is a domestic violence dispute. Not just for the women, I know some women can abuse men. So I'm not that, the advocate saying only men are abusing women, but just the domestic system in general, 100% needs to have reform. It's tough because then, victims are scared to come forward. when you have they call heated passion crimes, when love is involved, they call them in the heat of passion, you do something, right? I don't know if you ever watched the show Snaps, where these women in the heat of passion, they snap and either kill someone or they make a really big mistake in their life. It's a real thing. And on the flip side of it, you have women who become, deceased from domestic violence, where they've had made complaints after complaint after complaint. Nothing was followed up on. Nothing was ensured that this predator didn't come near the victim, and then she ends up dead months later. So it's a tough system. I wish we had the answers to it. It's just really tough when law enforcement has discretion to do it, and then even the prosecutor side, because prosecutors can only go after a predator if the witness comes forward. There's no other evidence usually. There's usually no camera evidence. It's going to be physical evidence, and then it's all he say, she say. Well, he did this to me, and he's going to say no, he didn't. And so now, we have a case totally based on hearsay, and it's very tough to prosecute or defend a case like that.
Yeah, no doubt about that and everything. I know that at one point, Philadelphia definitely had kind of an activism spirit and everything. I definitely know that your mayor back in the day, some people thought he was an activist and everything. And definitely there was the whole MOVE activities that was going on up there. And some of the MOVE people are still in prison and everything. But I was wondering, in your mind, does they still have that kind of activism spirit and everything? Because I do remember definitely in the 80s and 90s, hearing about MOVE and hearing about the activism spirit of Philadelphia, which of course is historical because definitely being one of the, founded areas and everything, Ben Franklin and the rest of the gang were very much activists. But I was just wondering, do you feel that activism spirit, particularly in the African-American community, is still there, or has it gone dormant to some degree?
I think there's activism, but there's also a very big disconnect between law enforcement and the African-American community. And it's not funny you said that, but where the MOVE bombing happened, for those of you who aren't familiar, in Philadelphia, there was this organization called MOVE back in the 80s or 90s. The Philadelphia police, government, whoever they were, they bombed the houses of these MOVE organizers, and children died, adults died, and for a while, that street was just demolished. But recently, there are brand new, expensive homes that have been developed on this land, and it's caused a lot of not controversy, but just a lot of questions about how the city kind of handled the MOVE organization and how they still handle it. They're still trying to free, I can't think of his name, but he was one of the MOVE organizers and is in prison for allegedly killing a police officer. But they think
I won't say Jabbar is the last name, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
And so, yes, they're definitely still advocating for him, and they're definitely disappointed that this new development of expensive housing in that community has come out of this situation. And then even recently, I read an article, I want to say last week, where the University of Pennsylvania used some of the remains of the MOVE organizers that died in that fire. They were using it in their education and using it to teach their students. And they just found this out, and they have now decided that they will return the remains to the family members. But yeah, very big conspiracy, we still don't have answers in Philadelphia. And I don't know if Philadelphia is very violent right now. We're having a crisis. The crime rates are up. I think we have the highest murder rate over the past 5 years. Ever since the pandemic, the crime has just been really, really high. And so it's unfortunate that that's what's happening here. But yeah, there's definitely some angry, and some people feel rightfully so, angry energy from the community, the African American community, towards the government officials and the law enforcement officials.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One of the other things that I know is very popular and in terms of conversation is the whole concept of gentrification. I do know you kind of alluded to it with these new houses and everything, but
Yeah.
is that something that you feel the community is also very much concerned about as well? Because definitely, I know that even here in Durham, North Carolina, we've had apartments and different kinds of housing that have gone up in the downtown area that aren't exactly cheap. I mean, even our cheaper apartments aren't all that cheap, but they're cheap compared to Philly and New York. I mean, like you can get something down here for like maybe 700-800, and then there might be stuff that's in that $1,500 to $2,000 range and all of
Okay.
that. But some of that is in that gentrification area, and I do know that in places like New York and Philly, some of those apartments might be going for like 2,000 to 4,000. So I was just
Right.
wondering your thoughts about gentrification, and also if it's still an issue there in Philly as much as I felt it was, say, 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah, I think it's even more of an issue now. Gentrification is booming in Philly. And I was looking for an investment property early this year, and I was in the process of trying to decide, do I want to do gentrification that route, or do I want to just provide quality housing in a decent area? And I went with plan B. I couldn't bring myself to do like the gentrification route where I buy a house in, up and coming neighborhood and, sell it to someone who typically would never be in this neighborhood 10 years ago, right? It doesn't feel right. When I walk through the gentrified areas in Philly, I went to high school in South Philly. And South Philly is not like it wasn't back then. It wasn't the place to be. You go to school, you go home. Now it's, there's $1 million homes across the street from my high school. And I think it's, I don't know, it kind of makes me sad. And then when I was doing my research on the properties I wanted to buy on a certain street, I realized in South Philly, 80% of the houses are owned by LLCs or like out-of-state investors. So the people that are investing on the street never lived here, don't ever plan to live here, probably never actually seen the actual house. But they're taking these houses from people and they don't even live in the community. They don't even care about what's going on in the community. They just want to make money off of that community. So I think it's very, very sad. I wish there was something in place that could protect, the integrity of the neighborhoods where maybe at least 50% have to be resident occupied, versus where 80% of the block is owned by LLCs in New York. And then I would have been the only person, the local landlord on that block. So I didn't go that route. I actually bought a duplex in a more stable neighborhood that's not being gentrified, but was safe. Because my whole idea is that I want to provide housing for hopefully single mothers. I don't discriminate, but if I would 100% offer, housing to a single mother who might be denied housing somewhere else.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I know that definitely one of the other things that I'm a big proponent of, and when he was at the Clippers, he definitely was very active in making his thoughts put out there and everything, is activists that are also in the athletic space. And I actually went to school way back in the 80s with Doc Rivers, who is the current coach of the 76ers and everything. But I just wondering your thoughts about folks that use their platform, be they entertainers, be they lawyers, be they folks in the athletic field, in order to speak out on issues. Because like I said, I know definitely Doc came out on a couple of issues, as did a couple of other players. I think Ben Simmons even came out on some issues as well. But I was just wondering your thoughts about athletes, coaches, and entertainers, and I would even argue lawyers and doctors using their platform in order to speak on issues. What are your thoughts on that?
Right. I like the quote, if you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. So I truly believe that, people should be allowed to have an opinion, even if it's not the majority opinion on an issue. For people who have larger platforms like athletes and celebrities, that's a slippery slope, because their business is them, right? So their opinions can affect their business after all. So sometimes that's more of a business decision that they have to make than it is a personal one. But I think they should, strategically decide which issues they're going to voice their opinion on. And then there may be some they shouldn't, just simply because it's a business at the end of the day. And they want to kind of protect the brand of what they're developing. But I totally agree that they should use their platform to what they believe in. And then on the flip side, just kind of pick and choose which battles you're going to, fight.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and everything. And along those same lines, I'm assuming that as a longtime Philly person that you are a 76ers fan and not a Knicks fan. But I could be wrong because I do
That
know
is
that
correct,
folks
but I'm
will
more of
call.
a football girl, so I'm an Eagles fan.
So definitely an Eagles fan, but we'll root for the 76ers and possibly whatever that hockey team is that also does well. That I know is also up there. The Flyers, I
The
think it is.
Flyers.
Right.
The Flyers.
Yep. And then I don't think Philadelphia has a baseball team. I know
You too,
Pittsburgh
the
does, but I
Phillies.
can't think. That's right, the Phillies. What am I thinking about? The one with that mascot and everything. I should remember that mascot. What was I thinking
Yep.
about in that regard? But you're saying that in terms of your sports, you're more of a football person, not so much basketball, baseball, hockey, or whatever else is out in that sports
Right.
kind of category. And I will not hold it against you. Probably that one of your teams that is in there in that Philly area also goes against my alma mater, which is also Doc Rivers' alma mater as well, because Marquette does have to go up there and play Villanova and a couple of those other schools that are, I know, based there in
Oh, you went to
Philadelphia that are
Marquette?
part of the Big East.
Okay.
So we
That's
will not hold
funny.
that against you and everything. What are some of the other things when you talk to entrepreneurs that shock you that they don't know? Because I'm oftentimes shocked at the things, and we've talked about some of them that entrepreneurs don't know that I feel they should know. But what are some of the things personally that you are, when you're talking to your entrepreneurs, you really wish that they knew more about?
Sure. What don't they know? I do a lot in the intellectual property trademark space. So I'm going to say they're like me when I started out. I thought having a business, an LLC, I thought that name, once I created it, I thought it was mine. And that's not true because you can start an LLC in Pennsylvania it's called a Big Mama LLC here in Pennsylvania. Well, there could already be a Big Mama LLC in New Jersey, and that's totally legal because the states are independent of each other. So New Jersey is not going to check to see if there's some in Pennsylvania with this business name. So you're finding your state, but what happens is when you're ready to expand your business, like what happened with me, I found out Big Mama was already used in these other states, and now I can't do anything nationally, right? I can't franchise it. I can't, build a location in that other state because there's someone else in that state already using the name. And so I think when you're coming up with a business name, especially when in a type of business where it can go beyond your local footprint and you do want to expand nationally or even virtually, because now, in the virtual space, you have access to not just the US, but almost the whole entire world. Yeah. So you really have to come up with a name that is unique enough that it hasn't been used. And people think, it's 2021. So every name that could have been thought of has probably been thought of. And sometimes, yes. But, there's some tricks and tools to the trade that I, advise my clients on where we do come up with names that are unique enough where they can get their trademark and they are the only one in the US that has this name. That's the big key there.
How important do you think it is for a business to be trademarked in their individual states just in general? Because I know a lot of people that have businesses, particularly in the, I'd say in the beauty field, in the entertainment field, in the music field, and a number of other fields. But basically, it's they're the ones that came up with the name. They may have a business card in that name. They may have a number of other things in that name, but they haven't necessarily registered it with the state. So they are technically not necessarily a legal business in that state. And a lot of folks I know definitely on the college level do that on a regular basis. So I'm just wondering, how important do you think it is to actually go ahead and spend that money? And I know that it's not always cheap in order to have your name registered in your secretary of state and some of the other departments that handle that.
Right. So tax evasion is real. And even though the IRS is slow, they're very sharp. So I would, if you're making money, I always try to tell people to report it. But, you can also start a business as a sole proprietor, which basically means, I'm Asia and I do makeup and my name is Makeup by Asia. And I can start doing business like that. And then on my taxes, I would file a Schedule C that just says, I'm a sole proprietor under my social security number. I don't have an EIN or LLC. I'm just a sole proprietor that does makeup. I made $40,000 doing makeup, and I'm reporting it on my taxes. And that's really, at a minimum, what you should be doing if you don't have an entity like an LLC, a corporation, or a partnership. Just go ahead and file, declare yourself a sole proprietor under your personal social security number, and just, disclose to the IRS how much money you make, and actually get tax benefits for doing that. So for those people who are doing it kind of like under the table, I get it. But if you're paying taxes and you're doing something under the table, put that under the table money on your taxes, because it's going to reduce some of your tax liability, especially if you're like a W-2 employee at the same time. W-2 employees get taxed, I won't say higher, because there's a lot of variables there, but you can offset the taxes you owe on your W-2 if you write off things as an entrepreneur, either sole proprietor, LLC, or so forth.
Yeah, because I know a lot of folks, and I mentioned that at the beginning, were doing that whole gig economy kind of stuff. And I think technically speaking, all of that's supposed to, come from the corporate side of, say, a DoorDash or a, what does my friend drive, Lyft or Grubhub or Uber and all of that. But sometimes some of them feel like doing it, on their own side as well. So what is your advice on that? Because I do know that a lot of times I was always under the impression that even though they get frustrated with it, and I think that's why some of them decided to do it on their own, that it's supposed to be done by those gig economy businesses. Be like I said, be that Uber
are you saying that the corporations aren't taking the taxes out?
Right. Sometimes it seems like.
Yeah. So because they're probably declaring you a 1099 contractor and you're not technically an employee. So an employee gets taxed different from a contractor. A contractor is basically you work for yourself, they're paying you, and then you're responsible for your own taxes. And if you don't file them, that corporation has the duty to let the IRS know, hey, I gave Asia, $10,000 this year to drive Uber. And they have to report to the IRS. So now the IRS is going to wait for Asia to report that $10,000. And if Asia doesn't, then comes your audit, a few years later. Hey, what happened to that $10,000 you got from Uber? Why wasn't it on your tax return?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm oftentimes fascinated, and you're right. I mean, we got that extension. So this is the month of tax returns that usually would have been in April. But a lot of folks feel that they are going underneath the radar. So they don't necessarily file. I think that they say that, the amount of defaults on taxes is ridiculously high. But I do know that at some point, folks are going to catch up on that and everything. It's kind of like apartment forgiveness and court forgiveness on some of the things that have been going on with apartments and housing. But as I've been telling folks, it sounds good in theory. That sounds good in theory, but we've been in the middle of a pandemic for a year. So assuming that you have not at least been paying down on some of what you owe, you might be in for a sudden shock as we're now coming out of the pandemic. If your landlord comes at you and is basically like, let's say if we use New York prices, 2,000 times 12. So you now owe $24,000, and you're going to be sitting there like, I don't make that kind of money. And your landlord's not going to care. They're going to be like, well, you either need to find it or you need to find a way to find it or find another place to live.
Right. Yeah, I would be very careful. I'm a landlord, but I have a heart, so I get it. It's tough times right now, but there are some people, unfortunately, taking advantage of the system. They're just not paying because they don't, quote unquote, have to. But all of that becomes due as soon as they lift this restriction. So yeah, it's been a year. You're going to owe that $24,000, or you're going to have to move. Then you're going to have a judgment on your credit report. And then if they enforce the judgment, now they're garnishing your wages. You just don't want to do that if you don't have to. So start talking to your landlords now if you're going to run into that issue, and start negotiating a way out. I think it's the best way to go. Just avoiding it or playing that game is a risky game to play. So I would just recommend, start working on your strategy of your exit plan, because it's going to come. And,
Yep. No, I definitely agree with you. From a legal standpoint, what do you think to folks that are thinking about like their credit reports and thinking, well, I don't really need to worry about that, or they've got bad credit or bad credit reports, and therefore they are like pretty much giving up on not ever having a good credit report. So, from a legal standpoint, how important do you think it is to have those good credit reports, and what are some of the legal ways that folks can go about improving their credit reports? Because I do know a lot of times that is a major issue, not just for young folks in their 20s and 30s, but I would even argue some folks in their 50s, 60s, and 70s.
So I'm going to do a plug here because I am a volunteer for a nonprofit called the Bankruptcy Assistance Project in Philadelphia, where they help low-income individuals file bankruptcy to get a new financial start. And you get a free attorney, and I'm one of them that you would have assigned to your bankruptcy case to basically represent you in bankruptcy court. And it's my feel-good work. I love what I do there. It's totally different from my business practice. But I got into bankruptcy just for that reason. I think as a person of color and, having friends and colleagues and clients that are people of color, the financial system is predatory, it's discriminatory. And I truly believe in the bankruptcy system to kind of help people get a fresh start. It's not for everybody. And I know bankruptcy gets a bad rap, right? People think, oh, you file bankruptcy, oh, you're broke. No, you're not. It just means your debts are too high for the current income that you're bringing in. So we want to kind of get rid of that debt. And, when you get a credit card, for instance, you might have had a job and you thought you could pay it off. And then now you don't have a job and now you cannot pay it off. Circumstances change. And so a lot of times medical bills put people into bankruptcy, divorces, put people in things that you just don't expect happen and cause people to have financial issues, credit issues. And so I do think bankruptcy is a tool. It's one of the laws. Now I always say the legal field is reactionary, and they did create bankruptcy in reaction to some depression that we had. But bankruptcy is one of the laws that is here to help us, I feel like, versus like not helping us. Like bankruptcy is the only law that says, hey, you can borrow all this money and then don't have to pay it back. And that's very rare that the government is allowing you not to pay back money. Usually they want everyone to get their money back. So as long as you're not, fraudulently getting money. But yeah, if you're human, you take out debt and if something happens, you cannot pay it back and now your credit is shot. Really consider bankruptcy. It really is a great tool. I've had clients who we've gotten rid of student loans. We've gotten rid of like almost everything that they owe. And then 2 years later, one of my clients bought a house. And so a lot of people think that if they file bankruptcy, it ruins their credit forever. They can't get a home. And that's completely inaccurate. You definitely can start over and get to the other side of things financially. So for those people who have bad credit, I would just work on saving, work on getting. I'm not a credit repair person, so I'm sure they have, all these kind of new strategies they do to get your credit score up. But if you're truly in the red and you're under the weeds, consider looking in your local area if there's a nonprofit that does free bankruptcies for you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and definitely some good advice there and everything, and definitely even the ways that you were talking about. A lot of times folks that and I've had friends that have gone through divorce, they feel that the divorce is kind of what has driven them through bankruptcy and everything. And that actually had me thinking, as I was talking earlier at the beginning, about the horse race and everything, because I did watch the Kentucky Derby, and that was actually basically a divorce clearance sale, the horse that won and everything, because as I understand the story, the original price sold for that winning horse, I think that the people that bought it now bought it for like $30,000, which is still cheap in horse prices. But the original price of the original horse sale was $1,000. So, and it was a woman that was getting divorced, and they were basically selling everything on their farm because they lived in a rural area and all of that. So I'm sure that she's probably kicking herself right now, going like, I cannot believe that after I divorced the man and decided to sell everything, I told that horse. And I think that they only got one bid. I think that they said they only got one bid, and that one bid then sold it to the people that ran the horse and won the Kentucky Derby for probably like millions, if not more than that kind of money and everything. But it was sold originally for $1,000. So like I said, I'm sure she is probably somewhere kicking herself left and right, going like, that if I had known this, I would have been making a lot more money.
Was that Was the horse Medina Spirit? I saw one of the races.
Yeah, Medina Spirit.
Okay. But I saw the very end of it when that horse won. So, okay. Yeah, I was at where we at? Dinner? Yeah, I think at dinner. So, okay. Yeah, I've always wanted to go to the Kentucky Derby. I haven't made it there yet. Maybe I'll make it there one of these days.
It's apparently on a lot of people's wish list because it's on mine. I was having a conversation with somebody else, a friend of mine that works in media and actually does our picking of our lottery numbers and everything, and it's on their wish list, and it's been on my wish list ever since there was a popular book called Fear and Loathing, and it was like a whole series of books that Hunter S. Thompson wrote, and one of those was Fear and Loathing at the Kentucky Derby. He also did Fear and Loathing at Las Vegas, but ever since that book, I've always said that I wanted to go, so it's on my wish list as well. So maybe 2022 or 2023 for all three of us, and we can make it to that particular event and everything, because it's definitely on my wish list as well. So just to have that positive thoughts that it can happen in next year and all of that.
Right.
Are things opening up in Philadelphia? Like I mentioned here, our restaurants are opening up here in North Carolina. They've been opening up, but definitely more and more people are, sitting down, eating and everything. And I want to say the capacity has been increased. We just did an event for the minor league baseball team, and that was at I want to say much smaller capacity than usual, but there were people allowed in and all of that. But how are things going in Philadelphia in terms of, are you seeing more opening up society?
I am seeing more opening up of society. I haven't fully given into the opening up yet. So I do believe they're allowing a little bit more in numbers for gatherings and like weddings. I think at first it was 50. I think they might have increased it recently. And of course, there's still social distancing. But I went to the mall the other day, and there's really no true way to social distance in a public space, right? You're going to walk by someone, so there's no 6 feet in between the pass, right? But you want to stay 6 feet apart, vertically. I'm not a scientist. I don't know how the airborne stuff works, but I'm a little weary of this whole, social distance, because that we're not really distancing. But
to be perfectly honest, I'm still a little bit leery of even the vaccine process and all of that. Definitely think that herd immunity is real and that we need to get it and need to get more and more people getting it. But at the same time, I just recently was checking a Facebook post that I recently got, and I'm oftentimes checking my Facebook post of friends and everything. And one of my friends, and I've got hundreds, if not thousands, on Facebook and LinkedIn, but one of them had actually had both doses, and they just recently came down, along with their kid, a case of COVID. So like I said, they are recovering from it, but they still got the COVID despite the fact that they had not one, but both of the vaccine. So like I said, things like that kind of leave you a little bit scary and a little bit leery. And I know that there are different strains that are out there. We've seen what's happening in India, all of that. So definitely, even though it seems like we're over the hump, I'm not 100% convinced that there's not like some that other shoe that's about to drop as well. So until I've got total convincing of that, and until I see some, and I'm not a mathematician or a statistician either, but until I see at least some people that are in that field that are giving me some figures that make me feel a little bit more comfortable, I'm definitely for the social distancing. I still wear the mask, even though they said we don't have to when we go outside as much, but I still do just for my own protection and everything. So I'm still for the mask, the washing of the hands, and the social distancing, and whatever else the CDC had originally put out for us to do. And until I hear some better statistics and until the figures continue going down consistently, I'm still a little bit leery. I don't know about you.
Right. Well, my sister is a doctor, so I have a huge respect for the medical community. I was not good in science. I don't understand it. It's not my specialty, but I respect it. And I do appreciate their quick response and their research and their development. We're in the early stages of that vaccine. There's going to be, things that didn't come up in their controlled research room that they may not have expected. And so I'm just doing the waiting game. I'm just going to wait and see how it goes. And then, I probably would consider it in the future. But I do want to, the medical community is it's tough for me because I don't understand science. So I just respect it. And I hope that they get the vaccines all straightened out. And I know, like you said, there's different strands of COVID. It's kind of like the flu, we still have to get flu shots every year. So there's no true cure, right, to this airborne virus. So, I think we just got to take it day by day. And those who want to take it, please take it so we can kind of see what happens.
No, I agree with you on that.
All the data. I want them to gather all the data and then, show me all the data and then, I'll go from there.
No, I agree with you. Show the data, make sure that it's going to be safe and all of that, because I definitely wanted to be safe. And I can relate to having something that is your Achilles heel. I did not do that bad in science, even though that wasn't my strong suit. It definitely did well in English and things of that nature. My Achilles heel was actually foreign language, because foreign language kicked my backside, still kicks my backside to this day and everything. So although I may have some friends from different cultures and definitely enjoy talking to them, I know that both French and Spanish, which is kind of the go-tos when you were in grade school back in the day, they both kicked my backside. So I can relate to having something that is your Achilles heel in academics. So that was mine and probably still is.
Yep, so science is mine. I get it honestly.
You get it honestly. You said your sister was a doctor, and of course you did the lawyer field, and your parents were corporate and everything. Were they surprised as much as you said they were with your entrepreneurship and lawyers as they were with your doctor going into medicine? Or did they encourage her to go into medicine? Because it sounds like they were definitely trying to make sure that your, and I don't know if that's your only sibling, but it sounds like the two of y'all were encouraged at a very young age to achieve and to succeed.
Right. We were definitely encouraged to achieve. That was like their only requirement as kids: do good in school. Nothing else really mattered. But my sister's undergrad was in finance, and she was working at a accounting firm, doing very well. And then she wanted to go to medical school. Well, medical school, you have to have science courses from undergrad. She didn't have any of that. She had all business courses. So my parents were like, you're going to have to go back to get all these science courses and then take the MCAT. And they supported it, but they were just surprised that she was willing to go back to school to get the courses she needed, then to apply. So she had a delayed start because of that. But no, they were 100% behind her. Being a doctor, I feel, is much harder than being a lawyer. They take a lot of board exams. I had that one bar exam. She had a lot of board exams to take throughout her medical career. So that's why I have so much respect for all the doctors out there.
I can definitely understand that and everything. And it sounds like, so were you the only one that, because I know that was something that became an issue with my family and everything. Because like I told you, I don't have any kids. My brother finally had the two and everything. So that gave my parents, the grandkids, that they probably wanted to some degree or another, even though I do remember my dad saying that if whoever had the grandkids, he was going to use that as a way to get revenge on us for anything that we might have done bad to him in life. My brother was more of the wild card in that kind of sense and everything. So do they enjoy being grandparents, and is your daughter the only grandkid, or do they have other grandkids as well?
Oh, no. So I also have a brother who's about, don't quote me on this, maybe 11 years older than me. And he has 4 children. I have 1. And then my sister has twin boys.
So my
parents have 7 grandkids between the 3 of us.
So they're doing pretty good in that grandkid category. They're sitting there going like, nope, don't need any more of those. We got 7. That's more than enough at a family outing and all of that.
More the merrier. So who knows?
They're like, whatever comes our way, we would just go with it and all of that.
They'll go with it. Absolutely. Kids are fun. I like kids. I think they bring hope to this world of like madness. That's when you're an adult, you get kind of caught up in the adult things of life. And, kids kind of just bring that fresh perspective that we may not have been. Like my daughter, every week is something new with her. I'm like, what are you talking about? What is this? Like when I was your age, we didn't have these things. So,
it's interesting you say that, because that actually brings up something that I brought up on this show, as well as some of the other shows here on this network a few times, which is that one of my best friends, Zach, who does a show and is very much into funk music. He's originally from, I think, New York City area and everything, but he's been down here with his now separated wife, and they had 2 kids as well. And he may have had some other kids from a previous relationship. Matter of fact, I know he had other kids from a previous relationship. But that being said, oftentimes when we're talking, and he does a couple of funk shows, one on his own network and one on this network. But when we're talking, and we've also got friends with kids as well that are in that teen years, we're actually, and even the millennials, like those in their 20s, and I guess even some in their early 30s, but definitely between the teens to the late 20s, we're actually finding a lot of that community is very much activist oriented. So they are definitely one of the most activist oriented and most tolerant generations that I have seen. And I would say that as a positive. I see that as a positive. But I was wondering, do you see that with your daughter's friends? Because I'm seeing that a lot of these kids do not really care about, they're proud of their race, whatever their race is, but they don't care about racial differences. They really don't care about sexual orientation differences, and they really don't care about a lot of other things, but they are very much, adamant about the environment, adamant about climate change, adamant about a lot of positive issues. And it seems like they are probably, I guess I might argue, maybe the 60s, which would have been my parents' generation, and everything was the last generation that I've seen that's had this kind of attitude. And I would even argue that it's even more tolerant than they were, and they were considered one of the most tolerant. But I was just wondering your thoughts when you talk to your daughter and your daughter's friends. Would you agree that there is a lot more tolerance of these folks that are, say, between preteens to late 20s?
I agree. Well, I can only speak to like my daughter. She's 12, probably 13. She's in 7th grade, and she loves to say she doesn't see color. Everyone's the same. She's kind of oblivious to some of these racial issues that still are prevalent today. And I try to raise her to treat everyone the same, and that's what she does. So she doesn't get it. She doesn't want to believe that people of color or any kind of ethnic background get treated differently, because she just doesn't believe, she doesn't understand it. So yes, they're tolerant because they don't want to believe it. Because, her friends are all different colors. And so why wouldn't somebody like somebody because of their skin? It's unfortunate, especially kind of where I've been raising her. Now, I grew up in the inner city of Philly. I went to public school all the way through and was very aware of just, how Black people are treated, just walking down the street in the city of Philadelphia back in the 90s when I was in school. So yeah, these kids these days, I don't want to say they're oblivious. I think they just don't want to accept it. And rightfully so. It's 2021. Why should they have to accept that people are still being treated differently? Why can't we all just love each other and just all be friends? That's kind of, where we all want to end up. And so hopefully, I think, in a few years, I think maybe more active and outspoken about things that are wrong. But when it's not directly in your face, it's hard to identify with it. And it's like, do I go put her in a situation where it's in her face so she can realize it? Or, I just have to kind of teach her as things come up in the news, and kind of show her like the life you live isn't the life that everybody lives. And you need to be aware of these things because this world is not perfect. You may be put in a situation that is not fair, and you need to know how to respond.
Yeah, that makes sense. Another thing that I remember that used to go on, and this is more like in the 80s and maybe a little bit in the 70s, but definitely I would argue some in the 90s as well, was a lot of folks that were from urban areas, be that Philadelphia, New York, or whatever. They would have family. They may not come down and visit all that often, but they would have family that was in the South as well. So there was like almost like a summer ritual. If you would see a lot of your New York and northern relatives that would come down during the summer and all of that. So I was just wondering, is that something that you still feel is out there? And is there a lot of connections, say, between your parents' family? And I don't know if they've got any Southern roots or not, but I do know a lot of folks that did have Southern roots, and they would oftentimes, kind of connect the families during like the summer months. Because of course, during the school years, you're in that urban environment, but you would come down during like the summer and definitely around the Christmas and Thanksgiving holidays.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm one of those kids. So I was born in Texas, and then we moved to Philly when I was 5. So all I can remember as a child is Philadelphia. So my dad's family is in Houston, Texas. So every summer when I was a child, I was in Houston, and like my great grandfather had all this land, had a farm, and we would hang out on the farm. In the hot heat in Houston. We're from Philly, so Philly, it's colder up in Philly. It's the north. Things are fast and very, very different down in Houston on the farm. So yeah, I did that every summer. And my daughter actually goes to Texas every summer with my parents. They live in Dallas now. She's been doing that since she was 1 year old. So it's just a tradition in our family. Our kids go down to Texas for the summer and hang out with the grandparents. So yeah, it's still relevant in my life. So I'm sure other people are still, using that tradition. And I actually enjoyed it as a child, getting to see my cousins, because all my cousins were in Texas during the year. I didn't see them. So just hanging out with cousins, kind of just being free, running around on the grass. Kids don't get to do that anymore. Now we're all on iPhones and iPads and whatever, Roblox, right? No one's out, on the field for 8 hours getting bit by mosquitoes all day. They don't do that anymore.
Yeah, we don't do that at all. How do you try to encourage your daughter to actually do that? Because I agree that a lot of times, even like I mentioned, my nephew is totally into Roblox, and definitely I know my brother's got them, running the soccer field and doing other things that are outside, and definitely my dad encourages them to get outside as well. But I do know that there are some kids out there that are so attached to their social media, sometimes even to the detriment of their health. Because I know there was even some things that I think Instagram is about to do to kind of like discourage people from doing the whole likes and things of that nature. Because I was actually watching a film that may be part of a film festival. I'm judging that film festival, one of several, but several judges, that is. And I know this film was talking about what we were just talking about, that generation and everything and their positive nature. But one of the negatives was the fact that they oftentimes are so attached to social media and so influenced by whether people like them or don't like them and everything because of, that whole swipe right, swipe left and likes and all of that. So how do you discourage your daughter from getting caught up in that? Because apparently that's impacting some of our young people's mental health. So while we may be praising them for some of the positive things they're doing, there are some things that are going on that are impacting them mentally and everything. So I'm just wondering, how are some of the ways that you encourage not just yourself, but some of your parents that you advocate for to not get caught up in that?
Right. So my daughter will tell you she thinks I'm super strict. I'm the strictest mom of all her friends, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I don't care. I'll just be the strictest mom because there's predators on the internet. There's predators on these games. They hide behind children profiles and they're adults. And so I'm very hands-on. I am attached to most of her social media accounts. I manage, I monitor daily. I'm on her iPad looking at her history. I'm very, there's nothing she can't really get past me. She hates it, but she'll thank me later in life. My parents were that way with me as well. They were very strict. We weren't allowed to do a lot of things, and I think we turned out okay. So I'm hoping the same thing for my child. So, I think every parent is different. Every child is different. So I don't like to give parenting advice because I'm not a know-it-all. I'm just going day by day like every other parent out there. But right. I think it's important to stay involved in their lives, ask them questions, make sure they're aware that there are predators. There are people that pretend to be children on these games that are not children. Have the safe talk. Don't give out your address. All of that stuff. So I think just keep that communication open. Do pop-up checks. I do pop-ups on her all the time. And, that's kind of how we kind of manage it. I thought about like not letting her have anything at all. But that doesn't do anything, right? Because now she's deprived of something. Now she's going to try to find a way to do it behind my back, right? So she's going to, kids are crafty. I was a kid at once. So instead of, being, as strict as she thinks I could be, I try to give her a little bit of freedom, but she also knows like I don't play. I'm going to be checking everything.
No, you have to check everything. I remember that because they are folks that run those games even to adults. Because like I said, I've definitely had some conversations, including, but I'm one of those inquisitive people that's always inquisitive about life in general. So I remember talking to somebody, and then I talked them into letting me call them or them call me. And I'm sitting there going like, well, if you're supposed to be a young female, how come you sound like a Nigerian dude?
Right. Oh, right. Exactly. Yeah.
I'm
No.
sorry. I was like I wasn't supposed to know the difference when I'm hearing the conversation. I'm like, nope, know that that's not a American accent. Definitely from what sounds like an African country, and I definitely know the difference between a male and a female voice. So, like I
Right.
said, nice try.
Nice try. Well, this was
But
a good
yes,
conversation. I really enjoyed.
cool. And I know we got to get ready to wrap up, and I'm actually getting to wrap it up anyway. But one thing that I was going to ask you, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it as well, is how important, and then it's just a couple of very quick questions, but how important do you feel faith is to you? Because that's something that I know that a lot of people are very much involved with. And when I say faith, I don't mean just the physical walls of the church. Because to me, I consider myself more of a spiritual person than
Mhm.
necessarily a religious person. But I was just wondering, how important do you feel faith and or spirituality is to you?
It's very important to me. I grew up in a church. I have my own church now. I love gospel music. I'm a single mother because Kayla's, my daughter's father, was incarcerated for 4 years when she was born. And I feel like my faith is the only thing that kind of got me through that situation. And because all I really had was myself and a baby. So I just kind of had to figure it out and kind of just rely on faith and kind of do the work. I think as I got older, I realized you just can't pray and just have faith. You got to kind of put some work behind it. And so it's very important to me. It's an active part of my life. And I feel like it's the reason why I've had the success that I have had is just because I have faith, I believe, and I try to just be a good person. At the end of the day, I just try to be good to people.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And one of the things, and that was how I was going to wrap everything up, that we try to get everybody to do on the show and everything is to give any words of wisdom or any words of encouragement that you've not shared so far, and also let folks know how they can reach you should they want to get in touch with you, either for your advocacy work, your legal work, and all of that. And if there are any specific types of law that you feel you are better at than others. So one, how do they can reach you? But then we always ask our guests to share their words of wisdom, their words of encouragement, not just to us here in the United States, but to those around the world, because it is a global network. So, like I said, we do have folks that are watching from Australia, from New Zealand, from Europe, from Asia, from Africa, from a number of places around the globe. So definitely any words of encouragement that you can share, as many people are going through hard times, and apparently we're suffering from multiple pandemics, because folks would argue that what's going on in our race relations is a pandemic. Folks would argue that what's going on in our climate is a pandemic. And definitely we know that we're in the middle of the COVID pandemic. So there are several pandemics in my mind, and that's just three of them that came right off the top of my head. I'm sure I could think of two or three other ones. But any words of encouragement that you can give to folks in general, and also how they can reach you?
Sure. The words of encouragement I would like to, end off with, I think, is that live with integrity, or, live your life with integrity. And when I say, and what integrity means to me is that anything I do, whether it's work related, personal, related, I'm going to do it with integrity. So that way, if I make a mistake, if something goes wrong that I didn't expect, at the end of the day, I did it with integrity, and people can still trust me and my character, and know that, I mean what I say, and I say what I mean, and everything that I do is backed with integrity. So I know it's a hard time. I know we talked about earlier in the show about, paying rent. Some people cannot pay rent. It's totally understandable, but have integrity behind it, right? Don't just say, oh, I don't have to pay rent, let me take advantage of the system, right? Because then now no one's going to trust you. So, just try to just live a life of integrity. And I think everything will end up working out for you and whatever, goals you have in life. And then you can always reach me. I like to just send people to my Instagram, because then they can just find my website there. So on Instagram, I am The Lawyer Next Door. You can just go to that tag and you can see my website, kind of see what I'm all about. You can just catch me on Instagram.
Well, I'm going to definitely have thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. One of the shows that we have that airs 2 weeks out of the month. So they actually do, I think it's 4 days straight in a row, 1 week, and then they take a break, and then they do another 4 days straight. So about 8 days out of the month is a show that one of our founders, Nick Palveda, came up with called The Lawyer's Den. So The Lawyer's Den is actually lawyers talking about legal issues and all of that. So I'm actually going to mention your name to him, tell him to watch this interview that you were with me and everything, and hopefully he'll reach out to you because it's lawyers from around the country. Nick is based here in the North Carolina area. One of the lawyers, Gary, I think is her name, is in, I want to say Colorado or something like that. And then there are some new lawyers from New York. So they're from throughout the country. I don't think they may occasionally bring in an international lawyer, but I know that the lawyers are definitely throughout the various regions of the United States and all of that. But it's a great show. And like I said, a lot of times they're just going back and forth about some of those things that we were talking about earlier, like talking about gun control, what the Supreme Court may do with that, what they may do with this. And they come from different standpoints because some of the lawyers are more of the, I forget the terms, and I don't know where you would fall in this. So actually, I guess this may be the side question that I need to ask you as well. So some of the lawyers that are on the show are, I think y'all call them constitutional lawyers.
Okay.
Others
civil rights, constitutional. Mm-hmm.
Right, but they fall within like that strict definition of the law. So that kind of definition where they are following the law totally, like literally, almost like the literal version of whatever was said and everything. And some of them are a little bit more liberal in their stances and are more interpretive, for lack of a better term. So some of them are strict folks that are like, the law says this and the law strictly says this, and others are more open to interpretation. From our conversation, it sounds like you would fall more in that interpretation category than
absolutely.
The law.
Everything can be interpreted. There's a side for everybody.
Right.
I don't think it's black or white. I don't think it's black or white. I think the law is very gray. Very gray.
Right, and there are some folks that would fall within that category on the Lawyer's Den, and then there are some others that would be like, when they wrote it, that's what they meant to write it as, and there's less. I won't say that they're totally unstrict, but they're, totally less flexible, but they are definitely a little bit more rigid in their viewpoints. That's the word I was looking for. They're a little bit more rigid in their viewpoints. So definitely, I will tell Nick as well as Bill, who's one of the people that puts on that show, and Adam Lambert and a couple of the others that I know, that I found this amazing lady, and she's a great lawyer, and y'all need to get her on y'all show. So at least as a guest every once in a while. So I will definitely recommend that they add your name to the list as well. So if there's any final things that you want to share with our audience, I'm going to play that lovely little robot man, which I don't know why they gave me that robot man. I keep saying that and everything. But any final words that you want to share, either to your daughter, to the folks that are watching, or anything else before I hit that robot man, and then we'll be out of here because then I'll hit the end broadcast.
I'll just say I hope everyone's be safe this summer. Enjoy. I know it's been a tough year. Enjoy your family, your friends, and, go ahead and live your life with integrity. And I'll close out with that.
Sounds great. Well, you are a truly great guest. And like I said, not just the Lawyer's Den, but here on this show, I do hope to get you back at some point because I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation and really enjoyed meeting you through Potted. And definitely I've enjoyed our conversation, and I felt that people got some great enlightenment. And as my friend Brian, who does a show on LinkedIn, calls it, they can catch it now on a team replay, because some folks watch during team live and some people watch it what he calls team replay. So definitely they can catch the replays and all of that. But right now we're going to hit that intro, outro, and then I may talk to you for a few minutes on the other side of the end broadcast. And then I've got to do, believe it or not, Monday is my crazy day, because in addition to my regular work, I do 3 of these podcasts, 2 that are the streaming version and 1 that's the old-fashioned audio one. So I'm only 1/3 done.
Okay. This